Thanks for logging on to myfoxhurricane.com. We continue to watch an extremely dangerous and powerful hurricane. Now, through the overnight hours, Milton went through what's called an eyewall replacement cycle. When you have these very powerful hurricanes, you get those really small eyes and they continue to contract. And at one point, it looked more like a pinpoint on the satellite data yesterday. And what happens is eventually it gets so small, it will actually collapse and it will reform a larger eye. And that's what we saw through the overnight hours. So you'll see that eye cloud up. Now you're starting to see this eye clearing out. The hurricane hunters are finding that outer eye wall, the new eye wall, is starting to really reestablish itself very well. And so once that is done, this will likely start to re-intensify some more. We've already seen it level off and maybe start to re-intensify a little bit. So what it's going to come down to over the next couple of days here prior to landfall is if we see another eye wall replacement cycle, the dry air, and the wind shear. These are the things that will weaken this storm. Now, the other thing that we will have going on is, especially when it goes through these eye wall replacement cycles, the wind field begins to expand, and we are already starting to see the wind field expanding. And that means more of Florida, more of the coastline will experience those winds. Now, right now, winds are at 150 miles an hour, so it's a Category 4. It's a high-end Category 4. Now, it is expected to re-intensify as we go through the afternoon and become a Category 5 once again. This is really just sort of semantics at this point because we're not talking about a huge change in that intensity because at this point, whether it's a 4 or a 5, it doesn't make a whole lot of difference as to the effects that we would see. Now, it is not going to be a 4 or a 5 as it makes its way over us. It is expected to weaken, but it's still, we're talking about in a very, very dangerous situation. A Category 3 is what is expected, and that still will bring the severe storm surge and really extremely damaging winds as well. So you watch this forecast track, and it really hasn't changed all that much. The computer models are really starting to come into much more agreement. Unfortunately, it's agreement that we're not happy with, but we do have to deal with what we have heading in our direction. And that is basically working its way right towards the coastline. And the other thing that you notice, it moves across the state all the way back into the Atlantic, and it never loses that hurricane status. We're talking about still basically a Category 2 working its way right through the middle of the state and then pushing off the other side of the state. So our inland counties, Polk, Hardy, DeSoto, all these counties that are well inland, and you may think that you're much safer with this, you're still looking at a hurricane working its way through these areas. You can see that forecast track. And again, we're always talking about don't focus necessarily on that exact line. Well, in some cases, you do have to look at it because it tells us a lot about the impacts in that storm surge as well. Anything to the north of that line, so to the north of the center, wherever that center does come ashore. It's important because we talk about that line, we talk about where it's moving on shore, but this is not etched in stone. So it can still push a bit further to the south, it can move further to the north. But the idea is if you're on that left-hand side, that storm surge is not as much because we are pushing the water away from the coastline. And on that right-hand side, you're pushing all the water onto the coast, and that's where you get that maximum surge. So that's what we have to watch for as this works its way on shore. And then obviously we have all the wind with this as well. So you look at all the various computer models, and yesterday we were showing this and we still had a pretty big spread. Now you're seeing more and more of this really starting to focus in, hone right in, and then so when you look at that model consensus, that is basically right where you see the Hurricane Center drawing their forecast track, southern Hillsborough into Manatee County. And remember, on that right-hand side, Manatee, Sarasota, you would feel that full force of this, but it doesn't take much. This nudges a little bit further to the north, that much more of Pinellas and Hillsborough will see that storm surge, but that's why we have to prepare right now across Pinellas County, Hillsborough County, even up towards Pasco County as well, with that idea that you have that maximum storm surge, because it could just as easily hit all these areas. So we are basically treating it as each one of these areas is going to see that maximum surge as we watch this storm approaching. Now, here's the upper level winds, and that is that storm or that wind shear that we've been talking so much about. You get this dip in the jet stream here. There's a lot of dry air in here, and that is starting to filter down very close to Milton, but it's going to take some time. And as this works its way to the north, Milton will start to experience more of that wind shear. That is what will help to weaken this storm, but it's not going to do it completely. So we're not going to see this weaken down to a category 1. This will weaken, but it is still expected to be a major hurricane as it makes landfall. And just as a reminder, we have not seen anything like this making a direct hit on the Tampa Bay area in really generations. It's been well over 100 years that we have been dealing with something so impactful like this. That's why we're taking this so seriously. We've got the hurricane warnings, which basically includes all of Central Florida, and you notice they go all the way across the state and on to the other side out into the Atlantic. So watch the Fox model to kind of get that timing of all this as we head into Wednesday morning. It's still to our south and west. It is what we call gaining latitude. It's moving further to the north, and so it is heading right in our direction. You can see more and more of those rain bands as we head through the afternoon and into the evening. Inside of these rain bands will be those very strong winds, and then this is that core of the storm. Now, you do notice as it's working its way towards us, you don't see as much of that rain on that southern side, and it somewhat looks like the southern side becoming a bit eroded. That is that dry air starting to wrap into this system. So we hope and we pray that it will help to weaken this storm as much as it can, but it's still, this is going to be a devastating situation as it moves through the area, working its way right across Tampa Bay, through Hillsborough County, and then continuing to work its way all the way across the state. So all of Central Florida is going to feel the extreme effects of this hurricane as it works its way through. Here's another idea or another way of viewing this, where you see these yellow shades. That is the tropical storm force winds. You have the hurricane force winds in the middle of this, and those are the hurricane force wind gust in that orange shade, and that is working its way right over the top of us as we head through the late Wednesday night and into Thursday. It does look like this is going to come very late as far as the landfall of this, very late into Wednesday night and possibly into Thursday morning, somewhere between, say, midnight to 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. Looks like the most likely time frame for that landfall of this system. So right along the west coast, that's where we have really those extreme impacts, but even further inland, we are looking at those winds 74 to 110 miles an hour, at least in gust. So definitely a very dangerous situation setting up with this as we continue to watch all this working its way through. Here is what that storm surge is all about. So if the storm is to the south, those winds are coming more offshore. That is blowing the water offshore. You get that maximum surge on that southern side. Now a track a bit further to the north, that would bring that maximum surge right up into Tampa Bay. So you look at the storm surge forecast, and basically from Anclote to the south, 10 to 15 feet of storm surge. That includes up into Tampa Bay, and this is substantially higher than what we saw with Helene. So just kind of put that into perspective, and then as you head to the north, up towards Hernando County, up into Citrus County, 5 to 10 feet of storm surge is possible in these areas as well. So conditions, they will continue to really deteriorate very rapidly as we go through tomorrow afternoon and into the evening hours. And we'll keep you updated right here on myfoxhurricane.com.